Hello, everyone. I think we are alive. Hello and welcome back to The Red Path. My name is Dara, and thank you so much for joining me on this day of days. We have the World Eaters Index finally, and it is extremely exciting for all of us. How is everybody doing? Great to see so much activity going on here in chat. That's big hype. Get some energy going. As I say, if you have any questions, before we begin, if you have any questions, chat's going to be popping off. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on it here on the side, but it's going to be pretty busy, so I might not see everything. If you want to make sure you have your question answered, make sure you can super chat us in chat and I will be able to get to them as we go. But what we are going to be doing tonight is working through all the data sheets from the index, looking at their abilities, looking at any possible synergies and all the good stuff like that. It's going to be really, really hype. There's lots of very interesting things to talk about here. Discord's been popping off all day with lots of different ideas, and I'm super stoked to get into all of this and start talking about it. Without further ado, let's see what's going on in chat. Lots of hellos. Sorry it took a little bit to get started, but hey, we're here in the end. Very glad that everyone here can join us. Unfortunately, Jamie couldn't be here, neither could Jack. They are both busy working / on holidays and things like that. So you're going to have to be stuck with me and my ideas for the evening, but it's going to be a fun time. I don't really know how long we're going to be here. We're going to keep it kind of fluid, see how it goes, but it's all very, very hype. Anyway, without further ado, let's start looking at what we've got going on here. So I am just going to pop up our army rules here on this screen. Hopefully everyone can see them okay and everything's sounding okay. But we're going to work through them kind of like this. We're going to talk about things as they come up. You know, there's probably been a lot of things that have already sort of been discussed in Warcom or leaks or anything like that. But yeah, let's go through it all anyway. So starting things off, what we have is the Blessings of Khorne. Now, we've all seen the Blessings of Khorne already. So what you've got here is you've got our blessing dice. So basically what you do is at the start of the battle round, you're going to roll 8d6. Then taking the results of those dice, you can activate up to 2 Blessings of Khorne from the Blessing of Khorne list, which is on the right hand side of the screen here. So each Blessing of Khorne costs a different amount of things that you're going to have to kind of pay for and all that sort of good stuff. We've all seen it all already before and we've done another review video on it. But let's just quickly run through it. So any double gets you 2 to your move, which is really good considering some of the data sheets that we've got going on here. It also gets you a Feel No Pain if you want that instead. If you already have a Feel No Pain, which actually a couple of our units do, it adds 1 to that roll. So basically if you've got a 6-up Feel No Pain currently, you're going to end up with a 5-up Feel No Pain. If you've already got a 5-up, as one of my favorite units in the book does, you're actually going to be moving to a 4-up, which is awesome. So then we're kind of moving on into the combat stuff. So double 3 or more melee weapons get the sustained hits ability, which is exploding 6s, which is awesome. Hello, Rin. Good to see you in chat. Good to see everyone else in chat. Keep the conversation going. I'm keeping an eye on it to the side here, but we are going to kind of focus a little bit on what's going on the main screen. So anyway, moving on from that, we've got Total Carnage, which is double 4+ or any triple on the dice roll. And what that does is basically on a 4+, when models die, they can fight on death for the entire army, which is quite a powerful buff. Could have Angron fighting on death there, for example, or Mass Jackals fighting on death, that kind of a thing, which is pretty interesting. Then moving on from that, we have Warp Blades, which is double 5s or any triple. Now this is probably one of the most powerful ones in my opinion on the list. What that does is it gives you lethal hits for your whole army for that battle round. Now lethal hits, in case anyone needs a little bit of a refresher, what that does is it means you automatically wound the target on 6s to hit. So for us, that's going to be a very, very important ability to try and get through the kind of tougher stuff like tanks and knights and things like that. Then what you have is Unbridled Bloodlust, which is double 6 or any triple, and that gives us advance and charge for a battle round, which is fantastic. Now look, we're not going to go too deeply into anything here, just as a quick highlight before we get into the main data sheets and stuff, but it's good to refresh ourselves on what those abilities do, because a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about here today, I'm going to be kind of referencing back to all the Blessings of Khorne and stuff like that, so it's good to keep them in our mind. Anyway, let's move on. So we have Relentless Rage. Now this is our detachment ability. So detachment abilities, they're going to change as we get new codexes and things like that. And we've seen a host of different detachment abilities for other armies. And our detachment ability is the tried and true, the old faithful. It is +1 to your strength and attacks characteristic on the turn you charge. So while that is not necessarily the most interesting thing in the game, it's actually very, very powerful, given that a lot of our profiles kind of sit at a rather interesting sort of in-between point where +1 strength actually bumps them up into a really interesting wounding category, into a lot of common units. We'll talk about that as we kind of get into the data sheets. But also the extra attack helps to add volume in a game which is seeing drastically reduced volume across the board. So there's actually quite a stealthy buff there and stuff. So that's actually quite good too. As I'm seeing in chat though, yeah, people are saying it's only when you charge, it's not when you're also charged in return. So yeah, basically that kind of sucks a little bit, but you know, a lot of the abilities are shifting to that, so that's okay, I guess. Anyway, let's move on. So we have the stratagems here. Now we've seen one of these stratagems before, but we have a whole host of other ones here, and it's interesting. On surface, they might not seem like the most powerful things ever, but when you start to think about them, start to think how it kind of synergize with other things in the army, how they kind of stack up and stuff, it gets quite powerful. So we're going to start with Gory Massacre here. So it's 1 CP. You do it in the fight phase. 1 World Eater unit from your army that made a charge move this turn and destroyed 1 or more enemy units in this phase. So you basically have to make a charge and you have to wipe out the entire enemy unit. Kind of difficult to do given how survivable things are going to be in this edition, but what it does is that in your opponent's next command phase, every enemy unit within 6 of the unit of your unit which killed the enemy unit must then take a battle shock test. If they're below half strength, then they have to subtract 1 from that test. So essentially, for 1 CP, what you can kind of trigger is this battle shock aura, which is an interesting ability. On the surface, it might not seem that powerful. And it's going to be situationally powerful depending on what army you're playing against. For example, if you're playing into Imperial Guard and you battle shock a whole load of guys all around you, they're not going to be able to get any of their orders off. If you battle shock things like that are all on objectives, say now you have like a kind of a mid-board fiasco going on and some of your 8-bound or something wipe out an enemy unit, and they activate this ability, and for all the objectives around them, anyone who's on them, if they fail those battle shock tests, they're dropping to OC0, which is great. It can really help kind of mess up the scoring and all that sort of stuff. So I'm a big fan of that one, especially for 1 CP. It seems kind of cheap. Now we're going to have to kind of see how the CP economy shakes out for us, because from my reading of it, I didn't see any way in our army that we can gain additional CP during the game. So that's going to be a little bit detrimental for us in the long run. Anyway, just before we move on, just going to quickly check chat, make sure I'm not missing anything. Lots of good chat going on. Anyway, keep it going. If anyone wants any questions, as always, drop a super chat in there. I'll answer them as they come up. But moving on to For the Skull Throne, the old reliable. It's 1 CP. You use this in the fight phase on a World Eater's unit that has not been selected to fight. What it does is if you're fighting a character, monster, or vehicle, you get +1 to the wound roll. It's basically Veterans of the Long War for things that are monsters, vehicles, or characters. So it's really, really powerful. A lot of people are kind of saying that our army lacks anti-tank, and to a point, this is definitely true. It does in some places, but this stratagem for 1 CP is going to be phenomenally useful at overcoming that weakness. Things like 8-bound, which are coming in at strength 14, will actually be wounding a lot of medium to light vehicles on 2s as a result of this. It's really, really good, I think, for 1 CP, and it's not really kind of, it doesn't alternate depending on, like, if you've got a unit of, say, 6 8-bound, it becomes 2 CP, straight up 1 CP across the board. For example, you could use this on Angron if you wanted to. If you're sending him into a knight or something difficult to kill like that, and you want to make sure that you're doing the business, pop off 1 CP on Angron, and he's wounding that knight on 2s, which is incredible. Really, really good. Love that stratagem. Probably one of my favorites here. It's simple, but it's highly, highly effective. Anyway, let's see. From what we've got next is For the Blood God. So how this works, this is quite an interesting one actually. So it's 1 CP, and you do it after a World Eater's unit from your army destroys an enemy unit. What you do is you target that World Eater's unit and you make a Blessing of Khorne roll. So that's our blessing dice, the 8 dice that you do. What happens after you roll that is you can use one of the you can activate one blessing from that roll, and it doesn't count towards your maximum blessings already active for the battle round. So it's a little bit strange. It's a little bit strange. I do have to say that. However, the interesting thing about this is that if you have a situation that occurs where basically you're going second and you haven't got your blessing roll that you want at the top of the turn. Say you're looking for +2, or well, you'll always get +2 to move, but say you're looking for advance and charge. And your opponent charges you, and maybe you've interrupted combat or something like that, and you've killed their unit. You spend a CP, and you activate this, you fish for that blessing that you're trying to look for. That's just one kind of place that you can apply this. Now, obviously, all the normal rolls for blessing of Khorne still apply, so if you've got berserkers and objectives, they're going to be re-rolling those as well. So really good stratagem there, kind of situationally useful, but I imagine when it comes up, very powerful. Anyway, what else is going on? Don, good to see you in chat. What's going on? I got Rory in there as well. We got a whole bunch of people hanging out. Great to see everyone. Keep the chat going. Anyway, moving on. Khorne cares not. 2 CP. 2 CP is very, very expensive now in the sort of modern economy. What we have here is just after an enemy unit has been selected has been selected to fight, and what it does is one World Eater's unit from your army that was selected as the target gets -1 to the damage of their attacks for 2 CP. Really powerful. Now, okay, before you guys start commenting on it, right? I know what you're going to say. It doesn't say minimum of 1. So yes, it's entirely true. You can reduce damage to 0 for now. It's going to get FAQ'd, so let's keep that in mind. I see you got a super chat. A good old third stain Jimmy. Real talk. This codex feels like Speed Freak plus Hero Hammer, and I'm all about it. Khorne Demons look great. I actually haven't even had a chance to look at Khorne Demons. Third stain Jimmy, thank you so much for that. But yeah, everything does look great, and I love your analogy. It does look like Codex Speed Freaks and Hero Hammer. Definitely the Hero Hammer part. More was the Khorne with the 5 as well. Thank you so much. -1 damage, technically, right now, does mean damage 0 on 1 damage attacks. So I see that stratagem as being very, very useful on the likes of Angron, for example. Because if he kind of gets in a little bit of trouble, -1 damage on Angron looks like it could be quite a potent ability. So that's cool. I like that one. Blood Offering is the one we've already seen on Warcom, which is basically when a unit dies on an objective for 1 CP, you basically retain control of that objective, which is very powerful for us. Really, really good. Big fan of that one. Then we have Apoplectic Frenzy, 1 CP. Now this is probably going to be used in every army whenever you have that kind of go turn where you pop off the advance and charge. What it does is you pick 1 unit from your army that hasn't moved, and when they make an advance, you don't roll for it, you just automatically advance 6. Now, people are cracked on this with Maulerfiends, with other demon engines, things like that. Angron, for example, is going to have a wildly massive move when you take all these things into consideration. When you look at the potential for an Alpha Strike, if you get that blessing roll with the Alpha Strike in the first turn where you're advancing and charging, having 8-bound steam across the board with an auto advance 6 and still able to charge afterwards is super powerful. So again, it's a simple stratagem, but it's incredibly effective with how things work with the blood dice. Alright, that is the stratagem. Let me just make sure that I'm not missing anything in chat here. Rin, you're talking about playing it as 0 damage with your jackals. That is so rude. It is important to remember now that stratagem is only in combat. It's not in shooting. So let's keep that in mind as well. But yeah, Blood Offering, awesome. Apoplectic Frenzy, awesome as well. So the thing is, right, this is the problem, for want of a better word, right? All these stratagems are amazing. They're really, really good. But we're going to be looking at an economy where stratagems are vastly reduced. So, you know, in the scheme of things, you're going to have to be very careful with how you spend these stratagems. So I think it's interesting. There's a little bit of a skill element involved in it as well, which I'm always a really big fan of, in terms of when and how you apply these stratagems, which is going to be the most effective, you know. But yeah, big fan of those. Anyway, let us move on. I'm just going to have a quick sip of water before we go on, because it's real hot. So we are going to speed through the enhancements here. So enhancements kind of work like relics. As far as I'm aware, you give them to a character at the start of the game. They're paid upgrades, and they do a variety of different things. So let's work through them here, because some of them are very interesting. The Favourite of Khorne is the first one up, and how that works is a World Leaders model only. Every time you make a Blessing of Khorne roll, before you're doing anything else. So before you do any of your rerolls or anything like that, you can use this enhancement. And what it does is basically get rid of that entire roll and you roll it again. It doesn't count as a reroll, so if you've got any berserkers and objectives, you can reroll those dice a third or a second time essentially, and you can mess around with them with manipulation. It says here, which is a fantastic, scary sounding word. You know, ooh, manipulation of the blood dice. But as far as I can tell, the only unit that can do that is the Lord of Skulls, and I don't think manipulation is a word that is particularly applicable to a giant brick of red doom. But anyway, it's a cool ability. I don't know if it's actually that good, because forcing you to kind of like pay points for something that you're only going to use when your entire roll is bad, it's a little bit wishy-washy. I'm not sure if this is actually an enhancement that I'm a big fan of. I can see its use, but you have to keep in mind that you got to keep the character alive as well, and all these other kind of interactions that are going to be going on. I can't say I'm a big fan of that one, to be honest. Let me see, what does chat think? When does Khorne pop off? It's a great question, Don. Khorne pops off whenever the blood dice tell us that we're going to pop off. Anyway, moving on. So we've got the Berserker Glaive. It's a classic, guys. What can I say? Berserker Glaive, consistently in every iteration of every book that we've ever had. It's an iconic weapon. What does it do this time? So you put it on a World Eaters model, for example, a Master of Executions or a Juggernaut Lord, and it adds 1 to the attacks and damage characteristics of melee weapons equipped by the bearer. So that's kind of cool. Bump up more attacks and get a little bit of extra damage as well. If you make a charge move, which shockingly our army will be doing a lot of that, you get D3 to your attacks and D3 to your damage instead. So you know, it's kind of like a Ron Seal enhancement in a lot of ways. It does exactly what it says on the tin. This is going to be great on a Juggerlord. It's also going to be great on a Master of Executions. And that's pretty much everyone that you can put it on. I can see people saying, put it on a Prince. We're going to talk about the Prince when we get to him. I'm not a fan. Some people are. But we'll leave it at that for now. Then you have Battle Lust. So Battle Lust, again, World Leaders model. You select the Bear's unit for the Heroic Intervention Stratagem for 0 CP, even if you've already done it in that phase. So this is kind of a similar enough thing to what we're seeing on a lot of other units and abilities in other armies. This is really powerful. This is particularly very powerful on the Master of Executions, who has Fight First for his bodyguard unit. So we're going to get into that combo a little bit later, but just park it in your minds for now. Master of Executions with Fight First and free Heroic Intervention. That seems really annoying for the enemy to deal with. Anyway, Helm of Brazen Ire. This is actually quite an interesting one. So what it does is it halves damage for the bearer, not in combat. It's just straight up half damage regardless. This is actually quite good for the Demon Prince, but again, we're going to talk about that when we actually get to his datasheet. But that is the enhancements. Let me jump into chat real briefly. We've got Ferris Oxide in there. What's up, homie? We got Jonathan. Hello, hello. Good to see all the homies coming out. Miss Wub Wub. Hello, hello. The Wing Prince with Glaive can, on average, kill the lion. Really? That's interesting. If he gets to the lion, I guess that's the thing. What if damage is 3? Yep, it's all good, you know. I mean, like, these enhancements, they're interesting, but I would say, at least from my perspective, again, this is my perspective here, the Berserker Glaive and Battle Loss jump out as, like, much, much better than the other two. But again, you know, we can kind of, we can talk about that as we get into things. So, we got a lovely picture of the Codex artwork there. Let's just take a moment to appreciate that amazing work. Anyway, moving on to the data sheets. So we have Angron here. We're going to speed through Angron because we've already seen him, we've already talked about him. But we can talk about him now in the context of other buffs. So he's moving 14. That move can be 16 with the right blood dice. And with the really right blood dice, that can be move 16 plus a 6-inch advance, meaning your Angron can start the game on the line and move 22 in the first turn and still declare a charge afterwards. That to me seems pretty powerful. I don't know about you guys. What do you think? Apart from that, he's reasonably survivable. You know, he's got that sweet T11, 2-up save, 16 wounds, all the stuff that we were kind of expecting. So he's coming in with the big smack on 8 attacks, which will go up to 9 on the charge. Strength 17, which is very, very good. AP -4, D6 plus 2 damage, which is a solid profile, especially when you consider you can add +1 to wound on him if he's going into a monster character or vehicle for 1 CP. That's really, really good. Again, likewise on the sweep, You're coming in with 19 attacks with the charging bonus on strength 9, AP 2, damage 2. Again, a +1 to wound here if he's going into infantry that he really needs to pick up. So powerful, so powerful. Then moving on to his ability. So we have Reborn in Blood, which is your 666 on the blood dice. He comes back to life. Now, this is going to be interesting with how it works with that stratagem where once you kill a unit, you can use those blood dice. Because currently the way it reads, and I believe this is the correct interpretation, is that you could actually use that blood dice to resurrect Angron if he is dead. So it can be quite interesting because if you've kind of, start of your battle round, you've rolled your blood dice, and you're like, I need to have my go turn here, so I need to use my blood dice for that. It's quite good. And then if you get that go turn to go off well, and you kill a unit, you can kind of do the blood dice roll again to just be like, let's see if I can actually respawn Angron. So I really like that mechanic, how it kind of works with that stratagem. It sort of frees up a little bit of flexibility if you want to respawn Angron, but you also need to have your go turn. So I'm quite a big fan of that, actually, how that kind of works together. So then we have the Wrathful Presence, which is the 3 abilities of which you pick one. The main one here is adding 1 to the charge roll for Angron and everyone around him. Very, very good there. You also have the reroll hits, so if you're not anticipating having to make difficult charges, because it happens in the charge phase, you can kind of pop off the reroll hits to ensure there's a little bit of reliability there. So overall, yeah, Angron's looking good, especially with 2 CP in combat. You can make him -1 to damage as well, which is nice. So yeah, I'm a fan of Angron. Let's see, am I missing anything before we move on? Yes, Donnie does hit much harder than Mortarion, that's for sure. The number of enhancements, James, I think is game size dependent, but I might be wrong about that. What else do we have? First, if you have to reroll blood dice strat, then you use the extra blood dice roll. Do you get a reroll on it? I think you do, as far as I'm aware. Anyway, let's move on. There's Angron again. So, Khorne. Okay, everyone's very, very excited about Khorne, so let's talk about him. So he moves 6, he's tough 4, 3 up save, 5 wounds, leadership 6, OC 1. Very, very kind of standard stuff. His plasma pistol is essentially always overcharged, doesn't hurt himself anymore. Brilliant. Then we have Gorechild. Gorechild is looking smashing. Really, really good profile here. So he's got 8 attacks, going to 9 on the charge, coming in on a mighty strength 6, hitting on 2s, going up to strength 7 on the charge, AP 2, flat damage 3. Very, very spicy profile when you take into account the other 9th edition combat profiles and how they've been reduced going into 10th. So Khorne is a leader, which means he can join some units. While he's leading a unit, which is the Berserkers in this case, every time they make an attack roll, you can re-roll the hit roll of 1 and re-roll a wound roll of 1. Hilariously, this is not restricted to just combat. So, the Berserker bolt pistol action is going to be really good in Khorne's unit. But that's about it. Look, it's a very strong ability. Re-rolling hit rolls and wound rolls of 1. Just very solid. Gives off the old Captain Lieutenant Dara all in one. Fantastic glow up. The Betrayer, because Khorne has to have a rule for killing his own guys, as we all know. Essentially how it works, at the end of the charge phase, if this model is leading a unit and not within engagement range of an enemy unit, take a leadership test to them, so you need to roll a 6+. If you fail it, one of the Berserkers just dies. Cool. Then we have Berserker Frenzy, which is actually a really cool rule for Khorne. Essentially what it is if he gets killed in melee and he has not already fought, he gets to fight on death. Brilliant. Really good for Khorne, because a lot of the time he can kind of get countercharged, slapped down, doesn't get to do his damage. A little bit sad. Cool. Let's quickly catch up in chat. Hey Paul, what's up? Nice to see you, homie. It's Dara. You know me. I know you, homie. What is good? No enhancements for named characters. This much is true. Cool. Right, we're going to move on. Chat is popping off. Keep it going, people. Love to see it. Again, if you want to get my attention and answer a specific question, hit me up with a super chat and I'll be sure to address that one. Things are going by a little bit quick and I'm trying to get through all the data sheets here. But yeah, let me know if you're curious about anything. So we got Khorne anyway. He can go into Berserkers, as I say. Invocatus, the one that everyone wanted to know about. How is Invocatus going to change? It's interesting now. Invocatus and the Juggernaut Lord can both join Berserkers, Eightbound and Exalted Eightbound. Kind of an interesting design choice, and I have mixed feelings about this, so I'm going to talk about that a little bit before we go on any further. So, them being able to join units instead of getting lone operative is kind of a little bit awkward because it almost funnels you into being forced, in inverted commas, to actually bring those bodyguard units for these guys, because otherwise they're just going to kind of get picked out on their own out in the open. The problem with that then is you have these bodyguard units who a lot of the time want to be inside a transport and don't actually get the ability to do that now. So you might have berserkers running up the board, which are fairly easy targets for a lot of the good shooting in the game. So I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Regardless though, Invocatus has a scout move of 6, which is pretty good. He's got Coward's Bane, his chain axe, which does devastating wounds, so wound rolls of 6s do mortals. He's coming in with 7 attacks, popping up to 8 on the charge, hitting on 2s at strength 7 on the charge, AP 2, damage 2. It's a solid profile. It's kind of similar to what he already had. It's not like amazing. It's an average infantry killer, I would say. Then you've got the Juggernaut coming in, kind of as we expected, with the extra attacks, plus 1 to wound on the charge for him. He's got 4 attacks, hitting on 3s at 6, 1, 2. Which is fine. Invocatus isn't really going to do a whole lot of killing. I'm going to say that right now. But what he does is actually a really, really cool ability. And this is going to synergize really well with Exalted 8-bound. So I'll grab to them in a little bit. But what it does is, while he's leading a unit, you can fall back and still shoot and charge, which is great for 8-bound and Exalted 8-bound. You also have the Road of the 8 Bloody Steps, which is kind of like what it did before. Essentially, what it does is everyone within 6 of him gets... 2 units within 6 of them get the scout ability for infantry. So, you know, he can pop off berserkers, or what is probably going to be the actual situation is Exalted 8-bound are going to get a scout ability to run up with him and then jump forward in their own turn. So it's interesting. I'm not sure if Invocatus is as much of an auto take as he used to be, which is very, very good. Sorry, just see here, we've got Warboss Khorne coming in with a super chat. Avocado, the glorified cattle wrangler. He absolutely is. Absolutely is. Yeah, 100%. Always has been, always will be until we get Juggernaut Cavalry. Who hits harder, Magnus or Angron? I actually haven't looked at Magnus. I've heard he's very good, but I haven't looked at him yet. Anyway, let's see. What else do you have here? Talking about Invocatus. Yeah, so is he as much of an auto take? Not really. I would say the fallback and charge is actually... weirdly one of his best aspects. He's not going to do a lot of damage. You have a lot of things that can already scout move in this book. How necessary is he? Points are going to determine a lot of that. So let's see what else we have here anyway. We have the World Leader's Demon Prince. This is going to be the topical one. People are not going to like my opinions about the World Leader's Demon Prince. So he moves... Okay, before we go on... Yeah, anything in chat before we move on. Is Avocado still preferable to the Lord on Juggernaut? No, I don't think so. Not in my opinion, anyway. So the Demon Prince, he moves 8. He is toughness 10, which is pretty good. Saves on 2s with 10 wounds and OC 3, which is fine. He's got a glorified heavy bolter built into his arm, which is alright. And he comes in with 6 attacks on the smash, hitting on 7 attacks on the charge. Strength 11 on the charge, AP 2, damage 3, which is okay. It's not very killy, and it's definitely not anti-tank, which is kind of what I was hoping he would be. Then his sweep is a mighty 14 attacks, strength 8, AP 0, damage 1, which is really bad, in my opinion. He blows up when he dies, which is kind of funny. And what he has is an aura of a 4+ invulnerable save. So it's good. It's what everyone's talking about, is this aura of 4+ invulnerable save. Very, very good. And he gets devastating wounds for himself when he charges in, which is also decent. The problem with the Demon Prince is he is neither a leader nor a lone operative. So if he's out in the open, he can just be shot. And when he's shot, he dies pretty easily, which is a little bit of a problem, right? Now, there's some leaked points going around for the World Leaders. I don't know if they're true, but they have the Demon Prince priced at 210 points, which to me seems very, very, very expensive. So, you know, I'm not really sure how it's all going to kind of shake out. Personally, I think he is a bit overvalued for what he's actually going to be doing. He's kind of easy to kill, and the invulnerable save is good, but you kind of have to strap him up with enhancements like the halving damage in order to actually kind of ensure that he's going to be in any way reliable. Now, you also have the -1 damage stratagem in combat as well to help out there too. But I just fear that if he walks out, he's going to get shot in the head and die very quickly by a fire prism or a D cannon or any of the other crazy weapons that are going around in the shooting phase. So that's like my problem with the Demon Prince. He also doesn't have deep strike, so you can't really rapid ingress him in either. So yeah, maybe he's going to be good. It depends. If the points that I saw for him are incorrect and he's actually cheaper than what he is, I think he's a lot more viable. I am misremembering who said it. It might have been Royal Purple in Discord earlier, but Demon Prince is surrounded by like 80 jackals with a 4+ invulnerable save and a feel no pain on them is very funny, and I like that idea, but we'll park it for now. Anyway, moving on to the Winged Demon Prince, very similar damage output profile. He can fly and moves 12 instead. He also has deep strike, which is kind of cool, but everyone in engagement range with him at the start of the fight phase has to take a battle shock test as Israel. So this guy doesn't give off the 4+ invulnerable save, kind of gives off a battle shock aura, which is okay. Not sure about that one really. And then Oath of Khorne, which is a rule that is so typical of a Chaos Space Marine written rule. Let's work through it. So at the start of the battle, you pick one unit from your opponent's army to be this model's sworn foe. When you attack that unit, you can reroll the hit roll and reroll the wound roll with the Demon Prince. If, at the end of the battle, you have not destroyed the sworn foe, your Demon Prince is just randomly destroyed. The less we say about that rule, the better. So we're going to move on. Okay, before we move on to the World Leaders Lord, let's see what's going on in chat. Best thing for the Demon Prince is to run Angron first. I kind of agree, actually, to be honest. Yeah, that could be pretty good. Battle Shock Aura is good except for Deathwing. Yeah, true. I mean, it's only his engagement range as well. If it was more like an aura, I'd kind of be a little bit more impressed with it. But yeah, not impressed with either of the two princes there, to be honest. So thank God that Macro Lord, my custom prince, died. Anyway, World Leaders Lord on Juggernaut. Really like this guy before we get into it. So he has an Exalted Chain Blade, which is 7 attacks, popping up to a good 8. Nice round number, that one on the charge. Hitting on 2s at Strength 6, going to 7, AP 1, Damage 2. Again, he's a leader like Invocatus, and what he does, instead of the fall back and charge, he lets you reroll advance rolls, charge rolls, and very interestingly, blood surge rolls for Berserkers. So I love this guy. I actually really, really like him, and I love the idea of introducing him with a unit of Khorne Berserkers. I think he'll be very good with 8-bound as well, but he kind of takes away their scout move too, so I'm not sure exactly how that's going to interact. But yeah, I think with a unit of Berserkers kind of coming up as a sort of mid to late game introduction, could actually be quite powerful. He also has that sort of mortal wound roll that we saw in the Juggernauts of Khorne. So, you know, when he gets into combat on a 2 to 3, they take a mortal wounds, 4 to 5, it's D3, and on a 6, it's D3 plus 3. So that's nice. You can never really rely on it, but it's nice. But I think the ability to reroll your advance rolls, charge rolls, and blood surge rolls is really good. The charge rolls, obviously, mainly. Like, we all kind of know failing a charge roll can be quite detrimental for world leaders. So stacking this guy inside a large Berserker unit is very, very good, in my opinion. And he actually does decent enough damage against infantry targets. It's a little bit worse than Invocatus, but if you put the Berserker Glaive on this guy, which you can, for example, it's actually quite interesting because he kind of outdoes Invocatus. On the charge, he'll have like D3 extra attacks on top of his 8. And he'll actually be going up to, on average, damage 4, possibly even damage 5. So, you know, this guy with the Berserker Glaive, really, really quite tasty, I think, in my opinion. Big fan of him. So before we go on, what am I missing here in chat? Any one named characters through anything else? Blah, blah, blah. Cool. Yeah, I think I agree with you, Michael, that the characters have unique abilities that lend your army to match your tactics. So I really like that point, because there's so much more kind of flexibility with how you play your army now, because the characters all kind of do something different. Invocatus actually, really interestingly, kind of pushes for that hit and run mentality, which is what his lore suggests that he should do. So I'm a big fan of that. And the Juggernaut lore definitely feels more like the bruiser, the kind of like uncaring, like, come on lads, we're going forward and we're getting into combat. So yeah, I'm a big fan actually of how he's shaping out. But let's go on to my favorite unit here, the Master of Executions. Good old Mo. Mo looks really good. If the point leak is to be believed and Mo is 80 points, I can see many of these guys being strapped into World Leader units. So let's go through them. So he kind of, similar enough stat profile to before. Move 6, tough 4, 4 wounds. I think he actually lost a wound, which is pretty funny there. He is a leader, and he can attach to Berserkers, which is super powerful. Really, really, really powerful. Anyway, what he does is he has the Axe of Dismemberment, which does devastating wounds and is precision. So it can pick out leaders in a unit. That is no surprise to anyone who kind of loves world leaders. He's got 5 attacks, going up to 6 on the charge, hitting on 2s, strength 7 to 8, AP 2, damage 2. Now picture that with a Berserker Glaive instead. So you're coming in with 6 plus D3 attacks on the charge. So you're going to average on 8 attacks and coming in with 4 damage on average, popping up to 5 possibly. That's pretty good with precision and devastating wounds as well, in my opinion. Huge fan of that one. That's not the best bit though. So the best bit is Trophy Taker. While this model is leading Khorne Berserkers, they get the Fight First ability. Wild. So wildly powerful. This is the real reason why I think World Leaders and Berserkers specifically are going to strap Masters of Executions to them, almost as like an 80-point sergeant, I think. Because essentially you're just going to have all these Berserker units that are like, yeah, charge me if you want to, that's fine, we have Fight First. It's going to be really bad for you. And when you think about how that combos with that enhancement for the free Heroic Intervention stratagem once per turn, like, you have these Berserkers heroically intervening, fighting first. It's a horrible, horrible combo. So I'm a big fan of that. And then we have the Murderous Swing. When the Mo targets a character, you can reroll the hit roll and reroll the wound roll. Same rule he has always had. So he is priced to move. The Master of Executions slots wonderfully into Berserker squads, especially big Berserker squads that you kind of want to last for a little while. He looks fantastic with those. Anyway, what's going on here in chat? Ronan, Mo is probably the most auto-take unit. Yes, there's going to be multiple Mo's in people's lists. Everyone's getting Fight First. There's definitely a lot more of it than I thought there would be as such a powerful ability. Yeah, a lot of people are hype on the Mo, and you know what? Completely fair. There's loads of good things to talk about with him. Like, he's just going to be fantastic as a supplement to Berserkers, I think. And when you I can see him sort of being introduced in that mid-game, after your 8-bound have kind of run in and done their 8-bound bits, that he kind of comes in afterwards with the boys, and it's just like, it's the icing on the cake, he's really going to make sure that he puts down units. Anyway, let's move on from there. So, whew, that's good. Khorne Berserkers. So, we have seen these guys in Warcom. We're not going to dive too much into them. They have Blood Surge, but what we need to look at is the Berserker output here. Because I thought the Berserkers were looking really rough, but when we consider kind of how the blood dice are going to work with +1 strength and +1 attack on the charge, Berserkers actually coming in with 5 attacks each, strength 6, is pretty good. AP 1, damage 1 is still a little bit sad, but it's not too bad, and the Eviscerator is definitely looking a little bit better, going up to 4 attacks on the charge. Now with a Mo leading them, or Khorne, where they've got those like nice hit and wound rerolls and stuff built in, or other potential auras that we might get onto later, Berserkers are actually looking a little bit better, because I think there's a lot of stealthy buffs kind of slotted into their units, which sort of amalgamate together to make a unit that on paper doesn't necessarily look that amazing, but when all the buffs stack up, they're actually reasonably reliable at killing, Marines, 5-man Marine squads, those kind of things, which I think is fair enough. Obviously, the ability to use the icon to reroll a blood dice roll when they're on objectives is incredibly powerful. We've all kind of talked about that a whole bunch, and the Blood Surge rule, as someone who exploited the crap out of the Blood Surge rule in Warhammer Fest this year, if you haven't tried it, bring Mass Berserkers, because it's a lot of fun to mess around with your opponent. But yeah, we won't talk about them too much and move on a little bit here. So how are people in chat feeling about the Berserkers? Let's see. Yeah, Mo gives them 5 first as well. Very, very good. AP loss is actually expected. Totally agree. Okie dokie. Jackals, the boys, Philip and Barney, for long-time fans of the channel, will know about my love for these funny little men. Jackals got a bit of a nerf here. I'm a little bit sad about them. Now, importantly, from multiple people reading it, we haven't found anywhere saying that you can only take Jackals, as many Jackal units as there are as many, Berserker or 8-bound units or whatever. So theoretically, the Mortals list is actually back in the table, people. We can spam the board with Jackals if we want to. Would that be a good idea? I'm not very sure. But let's take a look at them. So, they're tough 3, which shocks no one. OC1, little bit sad about OC1. And save of 6 plus, which is, to be expected. Interestingly, though, they have a Feel No Pain. Feel No Pain 6 plus, which with the Blood Dice goes to a 5 plus. So I did see some people talking about the Demon Prince with the 4 plus Invulnerable aura, and using the Blood Dice to get these guys to a 5 plus Feel No Pain. Weirdly quite survivable. Yeah, I am a fan of that idea. It's interesting. They have the Objective Ravaged ability, which basically means like they can kind of sticky objective, which I actually think is probably the best part about them. They can kind of like start in your backfield and just push out. However, it sort of is counterintuitive with the icon, which lets them do the Berserker reroll for the Blood Dice on an objective as well. So you kind of have to make the decision of which one of those two things you're actually going to be doing. But, it's a decent ability, I would say. Looking at the actual weapons themselves, they've taken a bit of a step down. So the basic Jackal Chainblade is coming in at 2 attacks now, 3 on the charge, with sustained hits 1. You're going to be hitting on 4s at strength 3, going up to 4, AP 0, damage 1, which is a significant drop down from where we were in the 9th edition book. Again, to be expected and entirely fair, they are only mortal after all. But they're certainly not going to be picking up quite the same volume of units that they were before. Then we have things like the Dishonored Chainblades, which are slightly different. They kind of go up and attack in a strength. And then the Mauler Chainblade, which is the really big one. So you're going to be hitting with that on 5s. It is strength 5, AP 1, damage 2. So kind of okay. And then the Skull Smasher, everyone's favourite, still has 4 attacks. So that's still pretty good. Hitting on 4s, so no minus to hit on that. Strength 4, AP 1, damage 2. So the Skull Smasher is still very, very good. Big fan of that. Rin with the $5 chat. Thank you so much, homie. Really appreciate that. Blood Surge Zerks with Mo with the Battle Lust enhancement is going to be my drug. I look very pretty. Thank you so much, Rin. That is a hell of a drug, actually. I didn't even consider the Blood Surge with the Berserkers and with the Heroic Intervention as well. Now, it is important to remember, people are going to forget this, but with Heroic Interventions in 10th edition, you can actually only do a Heroic Intervention on units in your opponent's army that have charged. So really, really important to remember that you can't just heroically intervene for free into kind of a unit that's just standing around. Keep that in mind. It's very, very important. But yeah, Jackals, looking okay. Now, there is something here that I'd like to actually point out about the Jackals. So most units have a choice of composition in terms of like 5 plus. You can sprinkle in some extra guys. The Jackals, you're actually funneled into taking either 10 or 20 with the same sort of division of like Dishonored and Packmasters as before. I actually kind of dislike that. Having to take 20 Jackals rather than, we'll say, because a lot of the time I was taking 14 or 16 or, weird numbers to fill out the points. Yeah, I'm not a fan of this change, to be honest. Like being tunneled into 20 Jackals or 10, not great to be honest. And we're kind of seeing it in some other codexes as well. I was worried initially that this would apply to everything, but seems to be just the Jackals. It might be the 8-band as well. Have a look at that. But yeah, so let us move on. So we go on to the Terminators. Now, people are very excited about Terminators in this edition, and I think it's fair to say that we can be excited about World Leader Terminators as well. Let's take a look at their profile. So they move 5, shocking. They're toughness 5, so that's good. They have a 2+ save, again, normal. 3 wounds, leadership of 6, which is very, very nice, and OC1, which is okay. They can deep strike, and their special rule is Blood Fury, which when they are attacking an enemy unit that is below starting strength, they get a +1 to hit, +1 to wound. Or sorry, did I get that correct? Add 1 to hit if they're below starting strength, and if they're below half strength, you get the +1 to the wound roll. So, the +1 to hit is semi-reliable, and the +1 to wound, I feel like if you're applying a Terminator squad into a enemy squad that's below half strength, it's kind of a I don't know, is that necessarily the best application of force? But obviously it's situation dependent. So where I can kind of see that coming up is, and I saw this being tossed around by a few people, you kind of have situations where we'll say something heavier goes into an Imperial Knight or Chaos Knight, and it gets it below that half strength, which isn't enough to kill it, obviously. But then you have your Terminators kind of come in the same combat phase. So you want to be charging both these in at once. Fight first with the Demon Engine, and then come in with the Terminators, who now suddenly have +1 to hit and wound, which they didn't before. So you have to really think about how you're kind of stacking up these buffs and things like that. And I think there's a few things here that we've come across and that we will come across where we're seeing a lot of things in the World Leaders Index saying if an enemy unit is below starting strength, if it's below half strength. So it's interesting because I think intuitively it funnels us into the aspect of bringing a sort of a force where you have ranged firepower and combat firepower, because you kind of want to be softening up your targets a little bit with a little bit of range to put in there as well, to make sure that you're getting these kind of below starting strength buffs going off and things like that. Alternatively, you charge in with multiple units and you cripple one and then fight with the unit that gets the benefit from, fighting into below starting strength or below half strength. So you have to be a little bit kind of technical about it. It's not a straight up like, here's a free buff, have fun with that. You have to kind of play it smart, and I'm a fan of that. Let's look at the weapons though. So you've got the Combi Bolter, it's as we were expecting, and the Combi Weapon, which is this new funny anti-infantry devastating wounds weirdness that apparently everyone in the World Leaders Terminator unit can take. So depending on how those are pointed, that could be the way to getting units below starting strength. Drop them in with a little bit of rapid ingress. Mosey on up, do a bit of shooty shoot, and then do a bit of chargey charge. So that's good. Heavy Flamer is the Heavy Flamer, as it always has been. Now, the Reaper Autocannon is a funny one. It's got devastating wounds and sustained hits of 1. And it actually doesn't have any negative to hit anymore. So you're coming in hitting on 3s with this guy. And you've got 4 shots, strength 7, AP 1, damage 1. It's actually not bad. Not bad at all. Then when it gets to combat, this is where things get a little bit juicy. So you're coming in with your cursed weapons. 5 attacks in the charge. Hitting on 3s. Could be 2s if they're below starting strength. Coming in at strength 6 to 7, AP 1, or AP 2, damage 1. So that's a pretty solid anti-infantry blender. And in a tight pinch, you can make that anti-vehicle with the +1 to wound stratagem. So the volume of attacks that these guys are going to be pumping out is pretty significant. Now with a pair of cursed weapons, so 1 in every 5, you get an extra attack and you get twin linked. The Chain Fist though, that's your daddy for anti-vehicle. This thing is coming in anti-vehicle 3+. 3 attacks going up to 4, strength 9 to 10. The strength doesn't really matter here. AP 3 and damage 2. So that's very, very good. Huge fan of that. Again, as I say, when you're chaining things with like the example of that knight. So you got a Maulerfiend, he comes in, hits the knight, takes it below starting strength. Suddenly that Chain Fist is hitting on 3s. So you're actually getting a quite reliable weapon going on there. The Power Fist is fine. I don't think many people are going to take it. Not a huge fan of that one. So then we look at the Terminators, their composition here. It's kind of what we're used to a little bit. So they're an interesting unit. Before we go on, I'm going to make sure that I'm not missing anything here. First, with the $2, thank you so much. They get stronger as they lose models. Really? Each time a model... If this unit is below starting strength. Okay, that's a big boo-boo. Sorry about that one, guys. That is a mistake. But, it's still fine. That's actually interesting. I didn't realize that now. They are maybe not as good as I thought. But still interesting. So, okay, keeping that in mind, how are we going to apply Terminators here? I can still see them being really powerful with rapid ingress, just as an ability to kind of toss them into the fray and get that like sort of 5-inch move and then the 4 into the charge afterwards. So that's kind of good. But there's a lot of ways of making these guys weirdly fast, just kind of from the get-go. So if you start them in a rune, kind of close to your deployment edge, we'll say, and they're moving 5, suddenly that 5 becomes a 7 with a blood dice roll. And say you get an advance and charge, and suddenly you spend a CP, and that 7 is actually a 13. So they actually get weirdly very fast. And let's say Angron's kind of floating around as well, and he's giving them +1 to the charge roll too. So there's a lot of strange ways of actually making Terminators ridiculously speedy. Now I know people are going to say the Land Raider. The Land Raider can only bring maximum of 6 Terminators. So I'm not sure if that's necessarily the play. But we'll get on to the Land Raider when we get to it. Thank you so much, chat, for letting me know about that one as well. It's been a busy day for me trying to digest everything. Am I missing anything else in chat? Or is it just everyone giving out to me? Yep, it's just everyone giving out to me. You think they're underwhelming, Jonathan? I'm a fan of the Terminators, to be honest. I think they're going to be good. If the points leaks are correct, they're priced to move. Then we get on to the 8-bound. So, the 8-bound, everyone's favourite unit and my least favourite unit. How are they looking? So, 8-bound, move 9, which is good, as we well know. That 9 suddenly becomes an 11 with the blood dice every turn. So that's good. With a potential advance in charge, and that advance being an automatic 6, these guys are fast. Shocking. What did surprise me here is toughness 6 on the 8-bound. So these guys are actually even more durable than they used to be. Do they need it? Probably. Saving on a 3 with a 5+ invul and 3 wounds each, as before. OC1 again, not terribly surprising. So these guys, they are built-in scout moves now. So they're built-in scout 6. So it's a little bit less compared to the Invocatus Rush. However, you kind of regain a lot of movement with the capacity of advancing and charging, and army-wide +2 to the move as well. So they're actually weirdly still very, very fast. Having the scout move built in is... Okay, this is going to be controversial. I know people are really excited to use this and stuff, but I think this is lazy and bad design. It's just really boring, because it sort of maintains the status quo, which was sort of all 8-bound all the time, forever and ever, and I don't really necessarily think that's going to change, at least initially. The reason for that, the scout move being built in, it actually encourages you to take even more 8-bound than before, which I'm not particularly happy about, because I'm not necessarily a crazy big fan of the 8-bound. So yeah, not necessarily my favourite thing to have. Obviously very, very powerful, but in terms of like unit abilities and stuff, maybe a little bit too much. We'll have to wait and see in the points. It looks like they could be quite expensive. The Beacon of Rage that comes off from them is an aura, which is quite interesting actually. So within 6 inches of these guys, every time you make a melee attack, you're re-rolling a wound roll of 1, and if they're below half strength, the target this time, you can re-roll the wound roll instead. So that's quite a powerful, and admittedly I think it's fair to say quite a strange ability to see on the 8-bound. But you know, it's good having a sort of a central unit of these guys pop up, maybe in an important moment when the Berserkers are getting out. Re-rolling wound rolls of 1. It's like a Lieutenant aura. I like it. I'm not against that one. So then we look at their damage profile. So they're coming in with 6 attacks, 7 on the charge, hitting on 3s, strength 5 to 6, AP2, damage 2. That's your average Eviscerator guy. So kind of a marine killer. Hasn't really changed in that respect. We also have the Sergeant's weapons, which are the heavy chain glaive, coming in mighty strength 8 attacks, going up to 9. I'm a huge fan of the chain glaive, always have been and always will. Strength 8 on the charge, so winning marines on 2s. AP 3, which is very good, and damage 1. So this guy's really good. I used to use him all the time, and I'm probably going to still continue to use the chain glaive despite what everyone else says. I think it's really good, especially with sustained hits or lethal hits on him as well. Anyway, then we have the Lacerators, which are 4 attacks. These are the chain fisty kind of things, hitting on 3s, strength 9 to 10, AV2, damage flat 3. So those are sort of an anti-vehicle option for your 8-bound squad, or anti-Terminator, as the case may be. You know, they're pretty good. Going up to strength 10 on the charge, they'll wound enemy Terminators on 2, which we're going to see a lot of the kind of Terminator-esque profiles hovering around the place. So overall, the 8-bound, a little bit the same, a little bit different. The capacity to have Juggernaut Lords and Invocatus inside these units makes them very interesting, especially Invocatus, because you can kind of come in and do a little bit of hit and run sort of stuff. You cripple a unit, that unit is probably maybe out of the game if they stay locked up in combat with you, which they won't a lot of the time with the regular 8-bound. We'll get on to the Exalted. You can kind of mess or run away in the next turn and target something else, so I like that. But I actually prefer the regular Juggerlord with the regular 8-bound, giving them the capacity to reroll their advance roll, which can be very good for 8-bound given how speedy they are, and reroll their charge roll as well is really good. So I think the Juggerlord is the natural slot in for the 8-bound, and Invocatus will be best with the Exalted 8-bound. So let's look at their unit composition. So you can take 2 to 5 of them, so they don't have the weird kind of restriction the Jackals do. Anyway, before we move on to the Exalted 8-bound, which are probably one of my favourite units in the book, let me just take a quick look at chat. Have I missed anything important? Loads of people are talking about not being able to get 8-bound. Yep, it's a big pain. Use Possessed. Just use Possessed. I used them at Warhammer Fest, and they said it was okay. So work away. Yeah, people talking about the heavy chain glaive as well. Michael Rossell, I see you. It's good. It's very good. As I say, feel free to super chat if you want to support the channel and get my attention in chat as well. Thank you so much for all the support so far. Great to see so many people hanging out. I hope the hype is real. Hope everyone's excited. Let me know in chat if you are excited, because I am, and I'm trying to keep an eye on everything here. Hope the stream isn't too disorganized. Anyway, Exalted 8-bound. So, These guys are hype as hell. So they don't have the scout move. So already I like them. Instead, they have Deep Strike, which is brilliant, and Feel No Pain 6+, which goes to a 5 every turn of the game if you wanted to with the blood dice. They have gone to a 5+ invulnerable save instead of a 4+, so in some cases, a 5+ invulnerable with a 6+ Feel No Pain versus a 4+ invulnerable save is the same. It depends on the amount of damage. Confusing maths. We don't need to worry about it. We're World Eater players. We can't do maths. However, getting a 5+ Feel No Pain and a 5+ invul on these guys is very good. Very, very good. I like that a lot. We have Overwhelming Wrath as their aura. So, I read this initially as only the unit they were engaged with, and then I read it as an aura and nearly shit my pants because it's so good. So, each time an enemy unit within 6 of this unit is selected to fall back, that unit must take a leadership test. If that test is failed, the unit must remain stationary instead this phase. So, make a leadership check. If you fail it, you're not falling back from everyone around these guys within 6. It's important to say before we move on, you can bring Exalted 8-bound in 6-man units now, along with Invocatus or a Juggernaut Lord. So the footprint, let's think about the footprint now from this unit. You've got 6 40mm bases and a big oval cavalry base. That is a massive, massive footprint if you want. So if you launch these guys in the mid game, say you bring them in from Deep Strike via Rapid Ingress, so they're coming in, maybe inside a rune, where your enemy can't access them in a fairly central location, even though it doesn't even have to be that central. And next turn, they're jumping out 9 to 11 inches, maybe with an advance on charge, and they're getting into the fight straight away with some very, very potent weapons and potentially shutting down a lot of fallback opportunity, which is really good. The thing about these guys, when combined with Invocatus, and this is what I really like about them, is you can kind of run these guys into a tough unit, right? And you can slap the crap out of them, and then maybe they fail their fallback move in that turn, which means your Exalted 8-bound and Invocatus are safe. Now that crippled unit, maybe they're going to die in your opponent's turn, maybe they're not. If they don't die, Invocatus can then pull them out of combat, re-engage another tough threat, and have some Jackals or some weaker Berserkers come in and clean up that initial unit. So the Exalted 8-bound and Invocatus feel almost like they're meant to go together. Very, very strong combination of data sheets there. And, you know, he just really helps them out. I'm a big fan of kind of putting them all together. Now, it could be a lot of points sunk into one unit. We'll have to wait and see. But they're also an excellent bodyguard for Invocatus at toughness 6, with potentially a 5-up Feel No Pain and a 5-up invulnerable save at 3 wounds each. If you're bringing Invocatus and you're going to attach him to Exalted 8-bound, bring 6. Just go the whole hog and bring a real meaty bodyguard unit. So before I move on to the weapons, let me just check chat. People saying Exalted are juicy. Yes, yep, really, really. Oh, good to see you, Purple. What is up, homie? Yeah, the hype is real. Okay, so let's move on to the weapons. So let me just double check what these guys are armed with. So each 8-bound is armed with an 8-bound Eviscerator and an 8-bound Chain Fist. Now, previously you were able to attack with both. Currently, at least from my understanding of reading these rules, which may be incorrect as we have discovered, you have to pick which one to attack with. So either go with the Chain Fist or you go with the 8-bound Eviscerator. The Chain Fist is your anti-tank answer. So you're coming in with 3 attacks, going up to 4 in the charge at a 3+ weapon skill. 3+ is interesting here. Strength 14, AP 3, damage 2. That'll become strength 15 on the charge as well. And there is a lot of toughness 14 vehicles around the place, so that's significant. Now, picture the scene where you have 6 Exalted 8-bound going into, let's say, I don't know, a toughness 14 vehicle, potentially the Land Raider or something like a Knight. The Knight might be a higher toughness, I can't remember, but say toughness 14 vehicle anyway, and they're coming in at 15, so they're going to be wounding on 3s, which is nice. You spend a CP for these 6 8-bound, and they suddenly go to wounding on 2s, which is really, really good. So you're coming in with 4 attacks each, so you're going to be hitting with, 24 attacks from the squad, hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, AP3, damage 2. It's very good. Massive fan of that. That's before you even think about blood dice coming into the picture. We also have the 8-bound Eviscerator, which is sort of their anti-infantry profile, very similar to the previous one. So 5 attacks, hitting on 2s this time, strength 6 to 7, AP2, damage 2. Solid Marine Killer, as I say. We have the Heavy Chainglaive, which is pretty much exactly the same, except it hits on 2s. And we have the paired 8-bound Chain Fist, which the Sergeant can take. So these bad boys coming in at 5 to 6 attacks, hitting on 3s, 14 to 15, AP3, damage 2. They are twin linked. They're okay. they're okay. A little bit sad they're not damage 3 when the other ones are. And a little bit confused about that too. But hey, what can you do? So yeah, overall, Exalted 8-Bound, stars of the show for me. Right, how is chat going? Points will be everything. Yes, they will. And supposedly Exalted 8-Bound are 60 points a model, which is very expensive. Very, very expensive. But, you know, with Rapid Ingress, they can be really good. Using Possess as good proxy. Yes, it is. And as I say, Games Workshop have said it's completely fine. Well, they said so to me anyway. So, you know, work away with those. Stomp is their T14. Okay, cool. If the Stomp is T14, that means they can pretty much wound anyone in the game on 2s. So if you were looking for anti-tank, the 8-Bound are your answer. Cool. It's time for the Land Raider. I'm going to have a drink of water before we get into this. I hope everyone's having fun in chat. Are we enjoying the stream? It's a little bit hectic for me, but I'm having fun. I hope you're enjoying it though. If you are enjoying it, please check out our Discord, check out our Spotify, or any of our other socials. All the links are down in the description, so make sure you kind of hop in. Discord especially is a good fun one. Right. Let us discuss the Red Behemoth, the Red Brick of Doom that everyone's excited about. So, the World Eater's Land Raider. Moves 10, up to 12 if you wanted to. Toughness 12, 2 up save, 16 wounds, OC 5. Wicked. Has the Assault Ramp. We all know what the Assault Ramp does. It's, if the Land Raider moves, the unit that gets out of it afterwards can still charge. Now, I'm going to say this now, and I'm going to say this on camera, so that we have it on camera, but people are still going to ask the question anyway. So when the Land Raider moves, and when you get out of the Land Raider, the unit that gets out is not allowed to move. It is allowed to charge, it is not allowed to move and then charge. That's out of the way. Good. Looking at its stats, it's everything that we kind of expected to see from the Loyalist one. The Havoc Launcher here is kind of a good meme. D6 shots, strength 5, AP 0, damage 1. If it's free, I'll take it. Otherwise, it's going in the bin. The Soul Shatter Las Cannons, so you're getting 4 shots with those, hitting on 3s, strength 12, AP 3, D6 plus 1 damage, which is pretty good. And then you've got your Twin Heavy Bolter as well. It's coming in actually pretty decent in combat at 6 to 7 attacks, hitting on 4s, strength 8 to 9. So weirdly, anti-infantry quite good, AP 0, damage 1. Obviously with all the blood dice and boss that you can put on it as well. Interestingly as well, all the auras that are kind of coming off from these strange characters like Angron or, you know, the regular 8-Bound, that'll affect the Land Raider as well. It's important to remember that core isn't a thing anymore, so auras and buffs that boost their combat will just as equally boost the Land Raider. Good to know. Anyway, let's talk about the Land Raider. Because it's very interesting. So, there's a lot of things that make the Land Raider viable, but I think to really talk about why it's suddenly viable, we need to talk about why it wasn't viable. Previously, the Land Raider, specifically in World Eaters, had a lot of intrinsic problems in how it wanted to work versus how it could work. So it was this sort of mainline battle tank that was also transport. It rocked up into the middle of the board, if it survived that long, disgorged its Berserkers or Terminators or whatever, and typically got tagged by an enemy unit and then could not shoot for the rest of the game. There's a few things that have changed now. So the Assault Ramp is obviously the big interest. You know, it allows units like Berserkers, and I think it is really going to be Berserkers that you're going to put in the Land Raider most of the time. It allows them to get this nice little movement boost. Instead of moving 6 to 8, they're actually moving 10 to 12. They've got a 3-inch extra disembark, so they're actually going up to 15 inches, and then still have the capacity to charge afterwards, which is very, very strong. So I'm a huge fan of that. It'll also keep 10 Berserkers and a Master of Executions safe inside a nice protective armoured hull, which is really good. So that kind of solves the delivery issue, and what do you do afterwards, that kind of thing. So really big to have the Assault Ramp going there. However, what actually makes it so good is that you can't really tag it anymore. This is like a stealth kind of big guns never tire thing in the core rules. So if you run into the Land Raider to sort of bog it down in combat, it can still shoot out of combat into other enemy units. So, provided the Land Raider isn't destroyed, which it definitely can be, you're getting full value out of having those las cannons strapped on, which means it's actually a very, very good mainline battle tank for us as well, because you're paying for the transport of a Rhino, and you're paying for the guns of a Predator, but you're not paying their combined cost necessarily. You're kind of paying for this up-armoured unit that can kind of do it all and deliver berserkers to the battlefield faster than anything else. So in that sense, it's really good. Sorry, I've actually just noticed that the Land Raider picture that they have here is painted really badly. It's kind of distracting me. But whatever about that. Yeah, so it serves as this multifunctional tool in our army now, which is extremely effective. So I'm a big fan. Let's see what chat thinks about it, though. T9 with the Soul Shatter was great. It sure was. I preferred it. T12, though. People are getting at me for saying it wasn't viable. Blah, blah, blah. Very good, very good. Yeah, so I think it's really good now. Are we going to see 2 in every list? Maybe not every list, but we're definitely going to see 2 in a lot of lists. Because if you like Rhinos and you like Predators, this is both of them slapped together. Now the points leak have this down at 255 points, which in my opinion, price to move. So I'm a huge fan of the Land Raider. Let us go on to the Predators. So the Predators are okay. They're kind of everything that we expected to see. So the Annihilator here has the las cannon or heavy bolter sponsons, which is fine. And its special rule is that if it targets monsters or vehicles, you can reroll a damage roll of 1, which is great until you look at the Predator las cannon turret, which has twin linked built in. So that's pretty bad. I don't really want to talk too much about the Predator Annihilator because I don't think it's very good, and I actually think you just get more value by bringing in Land Raider and having that transport capacity and extra survivability as well. So that's that. However, the Predator Destructor, the autocannon, I actually think is pretty good. So this guy, when you target infantry units, you can improve the armor penetration of attacks from the tank by 1. So that's pretty interesting because the Predator autocannon, which I noticed here, the Loyalist version has rapid fire 2 and the Predator autocannon here doesn't have anything. So hopefully that's a typo that gets fixed. So you've got 4 shots hitting on 3s, strength 9, AP 1, which will go to 2 if you're targeting infantry, flat damage 3. So that's actually pretty decent. Especially decent at softening up enemy units to get below starting strength to activate some of our buffs. And then the heavy bolters as well are nice, but I think I'd probably put las cannons on the side of this guy. But yeah, overall, not bad. Apparently 130 points as well. So if that much is true, I can see myself dabbling with Predators. I think the autocannon turret is actually a nice profile now, especially into infantry. But yeah, it's kind of a cool one. What are people saying? Think the Annihilator is good, Jonathan? That's interesting. Yeah, it's not very survivable. That's the problem. Anyway, that's the Predators. They're fine. So the Defiler here, the Defiler is a very big brick of text, and we're going to kind of look at it. The most interesting thing about the Defiler here is it's got Scuttling Gate, so it can move over other friendly vehicles and monsters, which is kind of fun. So you kind of avoid the traffic jam situation, and you can actually move over terrain that's less than 4 inches high. So that's kind of cool. It's got like all the gun options in the world, so it can be a gun platform. It's also got a pretty good combat weapon with the Defiler Claw. Actually a very good anti-tank weapon coming in at strength 17 on the charge. So, if those toughness 16 things are hanging around the place, like the Monolith, I believe, you'll be winning them on 3s. 2s if you want to spend a CP. But yeah, that'd be wild. And the Scourge is okay too, I guess. But yeah, overall the Defiler looks wild. I can't tell if it's good or not. The battle cannon on him is like pretty interesting. Strength 10, AP 1, flat damage 3 with D6 plus 3 shots and blast. Yeah, that looks tasty. It'll very much depend on the points of the Defiler. But I think I speak for a lot of us when I say that a lot of the reason why we don't want to bring the Defiler or we don't want it to be good is it because it looks like ass and it needs a new model. And I don't really think that's necessarily changing. So the Defiler can be excellent, but I'm not going to run it in many lists. Anyway, what do people think? Yeah, like I'm just checking the chat. People are literally saying what I'm saying. You'd be interested if the model wasn't the model. It's so true. It's terrible. Anyway, that's the Defiler. What a great meme. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Forge Fiend. I'm going to have a little drink of water before this because a lot of people are excited about the Forge Fiend, myself included. So, let us talk about the Forge Fiend. The Forge Fiend is movement 8, toughness 10, hits on 12 wounds and OC 3, which is, fine. Blows up for D3, also fine. Furious Onslaught is the Forge Fiend's special rule. In your shooting phase, after this model has finished making its attacks, if one or more of those attacks scored a hit against an enemy infantry unit, they must take a battle shock test. That's very good. Very, very good. Because what you want to be doing here, it's kind of been talked about already, but maybe some people aren't necessarily aware. What you want to do here is you want to line this up in a way where maybe there's a particularly difficult target ahead of you, or there's a target that you're worried about interrupting, or you're lining up a lot of different charges, or maybe, you know, there's something like a unit with a load of guns that you're scared about overwatching. What you do is you shoot the Forge Fiend into that unit, and you hope that they fail their battle shock tests, and then they can't overwatch you, they can't combat interrupt, they can't heroically intervene. All those things suddenly are not an option for them anymore, which is really cool, especially when you consider that from my reading of it, you could split, we'll say something like the Hades autocannons between two different targets, and both of those would have to make battle shock tests. Or, you know, you've got the ectoplasma cannon from the mouth as well. Now, I might be interpreting that incorrectly, I'm not sure. But as far as I'm aware, you could force potentially up to 3 battle shock tests for various infantry units, which is, I think, actually pretty good. The ectoplasma cannon then, so you can have 1 to 3 of these. So it's either D3 or 3D3 or 2D3, depending. You're hitting on 3s, it's strength 10, AP 3, damage 3. An excellent profile. It's made to kill Terminators, it's made to kill Marines, and it's just very good. It has blast as well, which is great too. There's nothing bad to say about that plasma cannon profile. It's just very strong. That's it. Then you've got the Hades autocannon, which is also actually really good. So you're going to have 12 shots from this. It's hitting on 3s again. Strength 8, so wounding Marine bodies on 2s. AP 1, so that's okay. And then flat damage 2. Which is amazing. It's actually just really, really, really good. I can't say enough about this profile. It's actually so impressive. And if I didn't have, or if I had any Forge Fiends, I'd probably be running 2 or 3 of these. Because you can imagine if you kind of set up this advancing gun line in the form of the Forge Fiends, where they're just kind of gunning and gunning and gunning into enemy units, forcing battle shock tests, crippling them, making them weaker, and all these other things. It's just really, really good. I'm very impressed. And they're not terrible in combat as well. Like, they're not amazing, but they're not terrible. So I really like the Forge Fiend. Let's see what chat thinks about them. Fluffy is saying play this edition. He sure is. Forge Fiends look awkward. If you mean aesthetically, I think yes. Games, you agree with me? Okay, that's good. I'm glad I'm reading that rule right, at least. But yeah, I think people are hype on the Forge Fiends by the looks of them. Does it have 3 plasma cannons and 2 autocannons? It doesn't have like all of those. So basically it has a plasma cannon in its mouth, and then its arms can be plasma cannons or Hades autocannons, if that makes sense. Or the mouth can also just be the Forge Fiend jaws, which look bad. I think always you're going to take the plasma cannon for the extra capacity of battle shocking. So as a kind of gun beast that moves up the board, potentially moving 10 inches every turn as well, I'm actually a big fan. Yeah, really big fan of the Forge Fiend, and I wasn't expecting to be. So, you know what? Cool. Okay, so strangely enough, they didn't put the Maulerfiend next, so we're going to be talking about the Hellbrute now. So, Hellbrute. Hellbrute. The time has come, people. All those contemptors that you lost, the time has come for vindication and revenge, because the Hellbrute is a nasty, nasty man now. Let's take a look at him. So he moves 6. We don't like that, but he's going to move 8 all the time, so we do like that. Toughness 9. Cool. I'll take that. Take that for $1. He saves on 2s now. I think a lot of people miss that. 2 up armor on the Hellbrute is good, with 8 wounds, leadership 6, and OC 3. Sweet. So the Hellbrute has a lot of weapons, and a lot of these weapons are similar to weapons that we already have in the book, so we're not going to go through everything. Things like the Heavy Bolter, the Multi-Melta, the Las Cannon. We know what they all do. The Las Cannon here is twin-linked and a single shot, so, you know, that's fine. We do have the Hellbrute Plasma Cannon, which, you know, is D3 attacks, hits on 3s, 8-3-3. It's pretty decent. It is hazardous, which is funny. It'll depend on points and if these weapons cost different things, which I imagine they will. Anyway, the Hellbrute, which this is the thing that I'm sure everyone wants me to talk about. Every time an enemy unit targets this model, after that unit has finished making its attacks, this model can either shoot as if it was your shooting phase, or fight as if it was your fight phase. So, how do we feel about Hellbrutes having fight twice, or fight 3 times, or fight 4 times? Because the situation is this: if you can line up the perfect avenue. It's not capped at how many times you can do this, and it should be capped, but it's not. So what you can have is you can charge Hellbrute into, I don't know, let's say 2 Leman Russ battle tanks, and he's gonna, tickle one of them with his tendrils or something like that, and then that battle tank is gonna be forced to hit him back in combat, and he can tickle it again, and then the other one's gonna have to do it, so he can tickle that one as well. So it's pretty funny. Obviously, the capacity to shoot as well is also really good. It's essentially the Fire Frenzy stratagem that we had before, except it's just free now, which is really strong. And then we have the Hellbrute Fists. So if it's got the 2 fists, which is a very cool way to model your Hellbrute or Contemptor, you gain the Twin Linked ability, which is really nice. So rerolling wounds, which on a model like this with a low volume but high damage attacks in combat is actually really good. The Frenzy rule is very, very strong though. I think a lot of people are very excited, rightfully so, about it, because of the capacity to kind of move around the place as well. Because the thing is, it says it fights as if it was your fight phase, which means it's actually going to get a pile in and consolidate move as well, if those things are capable of happening. So if you want that extra janky movement that we know and love from veteran World Leader players, you'll find it in the Hellbrute. Anyway, looking at the combat weapons briefly, the basic close combat weapon we don't need to look at. What we want to see here is the Fist, which is 5 attacks, hitting on 3s, strength 12, AP 2, damage 3. So that'll go up to strength 13 on the charge, on 6 attacks, twin linked if you've got 2 of them. The hammer is, it's not great, so you won't really talk about it. And the Power Scourge is, again, still very good at killing infantry. It's going to go up to 9 attacks on the charge, strength 8, AP 1, damage 2. So a really good marine killer there. I guess the thing is you have to consider what you want your Hellbrute to be doing. And I think a lot of people are going to use Hellbrutes as a gap filler in their lists. Do they need more anti-vehicle? In which case they'll have maybe las cannon and fist. Do they need more anti-infantry? I'll take the Power Scourge and maybe the heavy bolters or the plasma cannon or something. So it's a very good unit. It's like a little toolbox here with a very powerful ability that's going to catch people out. And I think we need to start considering all the extra movement chunk that we can get from these guys because it's significant. Anyway, let's see. How is chat going? Yes, Hellbrute versus Murderfang or Dead Company Dread is indeed an infinite fight phase until one of them falls over. Very true. Very true, Ryan. I love it. And I hate it in equal measure. Like double fists, Rin? Yeah, I like double fists too. For sure, for sure. Paragraph right below the first 2 bullet points on page 32, so it can't fight multiple times? Really? Interesting. The Hellbrute can shoot out of combat as a vehicle. Yes, indeed. Ever like plants? Yeah, I do agree. Like, the Hellbrute actually does just have the problem of dying before it gets to use that ability, so as to how good it'll actually be remains to be seen. Anyway, moving on. Okay. I guess we have to talk about the Heldrake. Unfortunately. So, the Heldrake looks really bad. Put it like that. It can hover, so it can actually start the game on the board, which is nice. And when it passes over enemy units, you roll 2 dice. On a 4+, they can suffer D3 mortal wounds. That's its special rule, which is pretty bad. Its Bale Flamer is also not amazing. It's kind of alright at anti-infantry, and the Hades autocannon actually looks pretty decent. The claws are anti-fly 2+, so it depends on how prolific fly is, and have devastating wounds as well. So, if there's a lot of fly in the game, they will be good at just doing mortal wounds to enemy vehicle or enemy fly things. The problem is, the Heldrake just always sits in an awkward spot where it's not very survivable, and it's, again, not very survivable. And the rumoured points have the Heldrake at 215 points, which seems wildly expensive to me. So, presuming that those are true, I don't really see a world in which we will ever use the Heldrake, unfortunately. Nothing about this profile kind of jumps out to me as being interesting or useful or kind of filling a niche that we don't already kind of have filled. Yeah, I don't know. What do you guys think? Let me see in chat. Will this live be saved on the Red Path? Yes, it will. The live stream should be available shortly after we actually conclude in videos on demand section. Miss Wubbo, you think the Heldrake looks fantastic? Yeah, it does eviscerate anything with fly. This much is true. I do agree with you there. It'll really kill other Heldrakes. But like, I'm looking at it from a more competitive kind of standpoint, where if you're bringing this guy in a tournament unit or in a tournament list, he's not necessarily going to be good into a host of different things. Yeah, I do think the fly rule is a little bit nonsense, and this guy having to go around terrain as well rather than fly over it. Yeah, don't know how I feel about that. It's also important to note that if you don't start this guy in hover mode, rules is written, he cannot actually charge anything. So the only way he's actually able to use his combat is if you start him in hover mode. So something else to think about as well. Anyway, that's the Heldrake. Yeah, funny one. So, the Maulerfiend. This is another one that a lot of people are very interested in, and likewise, I think the Maulerfiend is pretty cool. So, the Maulerfiend has move of 10, which will pop up to 12. It's tough 10 and 12 wounds, so similar to the Forge Fiend. Blows up for D3 as well. The Scent of Blood is its rule. Now, I know you can read the Scent of Blood here, and I know in your minds you're saying, that says the Scent of Blood. It doesn't. It doesn't say that at all. It actually says something else. What it says is Impaler Harpoon. Because this is the moment where we realise that the Bloodslaughter didn't actually go away. It wasn't made Legends. And this isn't the Maulerfiend's profile at all. This is actually the Bloodslaughter's profile. Because what it does is it gets the rule that the Bloodslaughter used to have. Sort of, in a way. It's kind of the same thing. Let's look at it. So, when you make a charge roll for this model, if one or more targets of the charge roll are below their starting strength, so our good friend the Forge Fiend is helping out here again, you get to add 2 to the charge roll, so just like the Impaler Harpoon before. And if it makes a melee attack that targets an enemy unit that is below its starting strength, add 1 to the hit roll. So this bad boy is hitting on 2s in combat, which is pretty significant actually. But let's look at what it does. So, it's armed with either the Meltacutters or the Lasher Tendrils, and then the Fists. The Meltacutters are fine. They're short-range Meltaguns, which I don't think anyone's going to take because the Lasher Tendrils just seem to be better. I guess you could take these in a way if you're going to get up very close. You could Meltacutter something to injure it and then get +2 to the charge roll. But you have to remember you're already within 6 inches to use these weapons. So do you really need the +2 to the charge roll? I'm not sure. Anyway, the Tendrils have 6 attacks going up to... I don't actually think these get the attack bonus because they're extra attacks. So 6 attacks, hitting on 3s or 2s, strength 7 or 8. Again, not sure how that works. AP 1, damage 1. It's a little bit sad that these are damage 1. Was hoping for damage 2. The Maulerfiend Fists, though, 6 attacks to 7 on the charge, hitting on 3s or 2s. Strength 14 to 15, so really good anti-tank profile here. AP2, D6 plus 1 damage. So this guy comes in, he's a bruiser. He is mashing enemy vehicles if he gets into them. Possibly hitting on 2s, possibly charge bonuses. There's a lot of possibility with this guy. And I really like him. I think he's priced potentially to move if the leaks are true. I think he was around 160, 170 mark, which seems to be a good number for him. But yeah, I like him. The thing about the Maulerfiend is I can see him having a role in a world in which you've got 1 or 2 land raiders full of very important berserkers. And you run these guys up the board with a 10 to 12 inch move, possibly with an advance and charge as well. And your opponent has to make the very difficult decision of, do I shoot the big battle tank carrying berserkers with 4 las cannons and heavy bolters, or do I shoot the Dinobot coming in, which is absolutely going to be tearing up my enemy tanks or heavy infantry. And in my mind, they can't do everything. They can't do it all. And in a world where we're looking at a lot of abilities that restrict the movement of infantry, having Maulerfiends and having Land Raiders pushing up the board as your initial sort of armoured wave. Like if you want to do the Demon Engine and Armoured Vehicle Rush, I think this is the way to go about it. They seem like they're almost like the perfect pairing for a transport or a mainline battle tank. Like they slot into that role so well, and I think that GW have actually finally found the right place for the Maulerfiend to live in. I do think the Lasher Tendrils are a little bit weak, but aside from that, I can't really complain about the status sheet. Let's see what chat thinks anyway. A lot of people are saying they like the Maulerfiends. Both fiends look nice and usable, Khorne Maze, but I own neither. I did own Maulerfiends, and now I don't. I gave mine away to GamesFan. But here we are. I do own Bloodslaughters, and guess what? Those are going to be Maulerfiends. Yeah, people seem hype on the Maulerfiends. Okay. Everett likes plants. You're saying something there that I just want to pull up on. Just want to go a little bit tangential for a moment. You're saying the Maulerfiend seems strong in an area where we lack anti-armor. I don't actually think we lack anti-armor at all. I think a lot of units in our army, when you consider the +1 to wound stratagem, when you consider the strength of the Exalted Eightbound, when you consider all the rerolls and lethal hits and sustained hits that we can build into our army very, very easily, I actually think we're going to run through armor pretty efficiently. So I don't really think that there is a lack of armor there. The lack of armor is perceived in the fact that berserkers can no longer necessarily kill battle tanks or knights in combat, which I don't really think is that bad of a thing, because should they have been able to do that before? I'm not sure. Anyway, it's an interesting point. Again, love to see all the hype in chat. Thank you so much, everyone who's tuning in. It's been an awesome stream so far. I hope it's not too rambly or fast or anything for everyone. Trying to get it all done in a relatively decent time, and keep an eye on chat as well. As always, super chat if you want to get my attention in particular about something or ask me a question. Anyway, let's look at the Rhino. So the Rhino is humble and brilliant, as it always is. Mark of Khorne, if you're watching, I can see you running as many combi weapons on Rhinos as possible and just spitting anti-infantry devastating wounds out the ass. If you're looking, homie, shout out, because that one's for you. It has the self-repair as its rule, so it regains a lost wound, which is kind of garbage. Interestingly here, moves 12 up to 14 with our blood dice, and you have the wonderful, wonderful change here. Like, thank you so much, GW. Rhinos, transport 12 models now. Excellent. Before anyone says it, you cannot put the Magic Pony and the Juggernaut Lord in a Rhino. They are mounted. They are not infantry, they are mounted. If they're attached to the unit, they cannot go in there. So don't even think about it. Just don't do it. However, you can have 10 Berserkers and the Massive Executions inside there, which is amazing. I love it so much. Wonderful. What a brilliant change. Excellent. Anyway, what are people saying? I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Appreciate. Yeah, people talking about Predators. It's an interesting one. I think the discussion here needs to be about the value of a Predator versus the value of a Forge Fiend. And from my reading of it, obviously points dependent and all that, from my reading of it, the Forge Fiend just seems a little bit better with the capacity to battle shock units. And I think that's the real crux there. I think the Predator with the autocannon might be more dangerous into some types of anti-infantry, but I just think the Forge Fiend is that little bit better at the minute anyway. Not to say the Predator is bad. I do think the Predator is still good. Anyway, okay. Alright, it's time to talk about the Muscle Master. It's time to talk about Chaos Spawn. Let's do it. Okay, before we go on, just to address something, Cotton. This will also be a video release. Once the stream is done, we will re-upload this as a video on demand, and it will be publicly available to everyone on YouTube. So don't worry about that. If you missed the first hour, you can catch it later. It'll all be there, no problem. Anyway, Games, I see you saying you're never going to take a Pred in a world where the Forge Fiend exists. I think I can see that logic. But I think it's very important to say that the Predator is not a bad unit. So if you're someone who loves the aesthetic of the Predator, which I do, I really, really love it, I think it is still good. It is still a good unit. Now, according to the points, the Predator Annihilator and the Predator Destructor is about 50 points cheaper than the Forge Fiend, so it's a significant point differential as well. Just keep that in mind. Again, leaked points, we don't know if it's true, but it is a thing. El, you gotta go. Thanks for hanging out, homie. Thanks for hanging out. Let's talk about the spawn. So the spawn now come in units, in units of just 2, I believe. Yep, just 2 spawn. No more single spawn, and no more big units of spawn. It is what it is. However, at the start of each player's command phase, so each player's command phase, they regain up to D3 lost wounds. And they have 4 wounds each, which is fine and nice. Their toughness 5. They move 8, which is quite fast. Moving 10 now with the blood dice. And surprisingly, OC1. I actually very much expected Spawn to be OC0, but they're not. Spawn have hideous mutations which hit with d6 plus 2 plus 3 on the charge attacks, hitting on 4s at strength 6 or 7, which is quite high actually. AP 1, damage 2. So actually 2 Spawn now coming in with 2d6, so average of 7 plus 6, so 13 attacks. Hitting at strength 7 into Marines. Actually capable of picking up a fine man Marine squad with relative ease. Sprinkle in sustained hits or lethal hits with the blood dice. Cool. Well, let's talk about the fact that Spawn have a 5-up Feel No Pain. Let's talk about that, because, remembering back to the start of the video when we mentioned those blood dice and how if a unit already has a Feel No Pain and you put that buff on them, it improves it by 1. So we have Spawn here with a 4+ Feel No Pain. That's pretty good. Let's keep that in mind for stuff in the future and how annoying that will be to shift them off an objective. Backfield Spawn holding an objective are going to be very annoying. And the fact that it's 2 in a unit, just string them out nicely between each other, get a good little screen going on as well. Yeah, I love it. I love the Spawn. Spawn in 2s and you have 3s. That is unfortunate. Unfortunate. Was I wrong? What was I wrong about, Warboss? Never trust the leaks. I'm confused. Anyway. Okay. So, long-time viewers of the channel know that I'm quite passionate about the Khorne Lord of Skulls. Passionate in my hatred for this unit. Consistently, across editions and across different codexes, I have been determined to never buy a Lord of Skulls. And I've always been able to justify it by being like, the rules are good, but they're not that good. The Khorne Lord of Skulls in 10th edition look incredible. Really, really incredible. Let's go through their profile. So, the number 8 occurs here multiple times, which is fantastic. So they move 8. Beautiful. Their toughness is 13, which is an interesting breakpoint because there's a lot of strength 12 kind of floating around the place. They have a 3-up save. They used to have a 2, back to a 3 now, and a 5-up invul, a mighty 24 wounds, and an OC, an objective control of our Lord's number 8. Amazing. D6 plus 2 on that deadly demise as well. So, what does it do? It's got a host of guns. Every single one of these guns looks really good as well. So let's go through them. Demon Gore Cannon, which is an amazing name, is range 18. So it's a little bit short range. But you're hitting for D6 on 3, 14, -4, which is very rare to see, -4. And D6 plus 2. So that's premium anti-tank there. That's much better than any las cannon that we've seen. It's actually pretty much Angron's close combat profile, I believe. So that's awesome. Then we have the Gore Storm Cannon. This is your kind of sort of anti-heavy infantry. So you've got D6 plus 3, hitting on 3s, strength 10, so we need Terminators and 2s, AP 2, damage 3. Brilliant for killing Terminators. We have the Hades Gatling Cannon with sustained hits and 12 shots, hitting at 822, so a marine killer. Then we have the Ichor Cannon, which is a very funny name. Weirdly doesn't have Torrent, which I kind of thought it would. But 2d6 shots, 722. That's kind of a bit of a meh profile. And then we have the Skull Hurler, which doesn't have indirect, but, that's fine. Again, 2d6 shots on 1433, so pretty powerful profile there. Big Axe hitting you at strength 16, AP 4, damage 8. Khorne Lord of Skulls is more damaging than Angron in combat there. And the Great Cleaver of Khorne with 15 attacks on 3-8, or hitting on 3s, 8-2-2. So also really, really good. The best bit about the Khorne Lord of Skulls is every time you make a Blessing of Khorne roll, for each enemy unit destroyed by this model in the previous battle round, so that's combat or shooting, you can add or subtract 1 from one of the dice rolls. Each dice can only be modified in this way once, and it cannot be modified below 1 or above 6. If you are just consistently getting 2 units killed by this guy in every turn, the chances of you bringing back Angron suddenly become very, very high. And the chances of you getting the exact buff that you want are not quite guaranteed, but very close to it. So this miniature, this towering icon of the World Eaters that I hate so much, has got a fantastic profile, and according to the points leaks is only 420 points, which is another funny number. This guy is riddled with funny numbers, but He looks fantastic, really good. The manipulation of the blood dice is an incredibly powerful ability, and it's very thematic as well. I kind of love it. Am I going to have to convert up a Lord of Skulls to make it look cool? Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. What does chat think? Can it fire all those guns? It cannot fire all those guns. It has a selection of them depending on what you want. Synergizes with using the stratagem for an extra roll. It sure does, actually. Yeah, it does indeed. Angron and double Khorne Lord of Skulls. Gosh, I didn't even think about running more than one. Yeah. Wow. That's kind of stunned me. That's 2 Khorne Lord of Skulls. The manipulation of the blood dice. Everyone's just saying 420. Alright guys, it wasn't that funny. It does look dumb, I agree. But the manipulation of the blood dice with 2 Lord of Skulls. Wow, yeah, that could be... We could be seeing a lot of this bad boy around. But, as far as I'm aware, that is the end of our index data sheets for now. So, let's kind of refer back to everything and talk. Oh boy! That was fun, guys. Let's talk about all those things in review. What do we like? What do we not like? So, obviously, we have like some rumored points kind of floating around the place, and we're not sure if they're necessarily true or not. But they read to me as being quite expensive, quite elite. Now, we have a lot of stacked and layered buffs kind of intermixed and intermingled with each other. So there's a lot of hidden power in the army as well, and I think they're actually a lot more elite than maybe what we're going to be used to. The horde aspect of the world leaders might be going away, even more so, and they're actually just much more capable of consistently killing anti-vehicle or heavy targets in a world where many infantry units aren't actually capable of doing that, which I think is a very interesting sort of position to be in. That people aren't really necessarily capitalizing or getting their heads around exactly how lethal the world leaders are. And I predict, much like our very first codex, that this is going to be the sort of situation where after you get a couple of games on the table, you're going to realize that these guys are actually hyper lethal, very, very capable of killing big targets. Because when you consider the stacking +1 attack, +1 strength, when we already have a relatively okay amount of attacks on our profiles, and then you start baking in things like sustain hits, things like lethal hits, reroll auras kind of sprinkled in here and there, and consistency. The whole thing just seems very, very consistent in terms of its ability to deliver when you need it to deliver. So it's cool, you know. I'm liking it overall. Eightbound having Scout is probably the thing that I dislike the most, mainly because it kind of just encourages you to continue playing that sort of alpha strikey Eightbound pre-game rush thing that was going on. Now, not to like shame or throw salt or anything at anyone who is doing that. If that's the game that you want to play, that's totally fine. But my preferred way of playing is a little bit slower than that, and I'm not a huge fan of Alpha Strike. So it was a little bit annoying to see that, but you can't deny that it's very, very good. Aside from that, though, the whole thing is very interesting. I'm actually really excited about the Exalted 8-bound. I think they're really cool. The capacity to take them in units of 6 now is just really, really good, especially when you throw in someone like a Juggernaut Lord or Invocatus as a bodyguard or as a leader unit within the bodyguard. I actually think they might be best just straight up deep striking them in, using Rapid Ingress to set up the positioning in your opponent's turn, and then just going full hog in the go turn. Like, you kind of want to be rapid ingressing these guys in opponent turn 2, so that your turn 3 is just murder. Very, very powerful, and it just kind of takes the head off the snake immediately. So I'm really excited about them in particular. I think Berserkers, while initially appearing to be a little bit less lethal, are actually going to maybe come out in the wash okay. The same with the Jackals. It remains to be seen on those, but I know a load of people are really excited about the Demon Engines, which is fantastic. It's great to see a glow up for them. And obviously the Land Raider is exceptionally good. Angron, without a doubt, is going to see play a ton more now, especially now that you don't necessarily have to take Invocatus to get that pre-game rush. You can actually do the 8-bound pre-game rush with Angron as well, which is really, really good. So there's a whole host of sort of different aesthetic that you can kind of play around with now. We went from where we were at the end of 9th edition from having maybe 1 or 2 distinct playstyles to actually just having a wealth of different playstyles with this book. You can focus on Demon Engines, on Mechanized Infantry, on Angron and the boys on a demon prince surrounded by mortals that are running up that are weirdly very survivable. You can focus on an Alpha Strike Rush, which is just fundamentally crippling to your opponent's entire army if you get the right dice. There's so much different things that you can play around with now, and it really feels like the design space has opened up to allow people to play with different toys in different ways and sort of create an army that is going to be good, but even better when it's something that's suited to their own playstyle, rather than necessarily having to be funneled into something that doesn't suit them. Those are my thoughts, my kind of overview on everything, my very quick initial kind of surface level thoughts. But I want to see what everyone else thinks. So if you're in chat right now, I'm going to kind of take a little bit of time to just read your comments here. If you've got questions for me, let me know. Now is the time to pick my brain. Just go crazy. I'm paying attention to chat fully now. So let's see what we've got going on. 500 points of demons being a good choice. I haven't looked at demons yet. It's probably a very good choice. I'm sure there's lots of cool stuff in there. Having seen the Bloodthirster datasheet, yes, absolutely. Really good. 100%. What else do you have? Skull Cannon causes battle shock. Wow. Really? That's very good. That's really good. Thanks for letting me know that, Michael. That's pretty sick. Yeah, with what Games is saying about the CP, I'm here for it as well. Our own CP is going to be very limited, more so than other armies. So we're going to see how much that kind of ends up affecting us and things like that. Exalted 8-bound is something to lean on. I do also think so. It could add up in terms of expense, as you're saying, though. What is my favorite unit, favorite ability, and favorite blessing? Okay, so my favorite unit actually is the Exalted 8-bound. I have this conversion idea in my head for making like fake red butchers, which is a mash of the current Terminator kit and the 8-bound kit to make these kind of like Terminator-esque mutated possessed guys, which I think should make them look quite distinct. So I'm excited to try and make them, and I also just think they have a very, very powerful data sheet, and I'm really excited to try it out in the battlefield. I think a lot of people are going to focus on starting them on the board, but I think their deep strike capacity is actually the best bit about them. So I really like them. My favorite ability is probably the Khorne Lord of Skulls one for messing around with the dice rolls. It's really cool. Really, really cool. And my favorite blessing is... I really like the +2 move. I think it's just solid, and it's just very good. The lethal hits one, though, is probably sleeper the best one. Will I be taking Exalted 8-bound over regular? You have 2 squads of 3 of each. Yeah, so it's an interesting discussion to have. I don't necessarily think you're always going to be taking one over the other. There's design space for running armies that have both, and there's design space for focusing on either, depending on what you're trying to achieve. The regular 8-bound lean into an Alpha Strike potential, and the Exalted 8-bound lean into the power of Rapid Ingress, and also making sure that guys are going to be bogged down in combat as well all around them. So I think where the Exalted 8-bound favour the mid to late game play, the regular 8-bound favour the early play. And as I was saying, Invocatus kind of slots better into the Exalted 8-bound, and the Juggerlord slots better into the regular 8-bound. So it's an interesting one, you know. It's kind of whichever you prefer, whatever suits you the most is going to be the best there. Games you weren't too sold on Exalted. Yeah, I mean, fair enough, I guess. Best unit size for 8-bound versus Exalted. So if you've got a bodyguard, if you've got a leader within them, the full 6-man squad is the money, because it's just going to be so hard to get through with Feel No Pains and things like that. Otherwise, I still really like 4-man squads, I think, for definitely the 8-bound and the sergeant with the heavy chain glaive. I think the way to go. My camera angle is really great. My setup is complicated for tonight, but thank you, Rin. I appreciate it. It's been a day setting this stuff up. What else do we have? Loads of forged feeds on eBay. Go nuts. Alright, people, you heard it here from Michael first. Let's get the world leaders on eBay. All those forged fiends that were locked in all those funny boxes are now finally going to be moved. And it's all thanks to us. I love it. Logan, that's pretty funny. If you put the guns into the Hellbrutes and charge into melee, for some reason I thought that you had to attack the unit that attacks you, but I guess you're correct. Yeah, pretty funny. Depending on points, Maulerfiends, Juggerlords, Eightbound, Exalted, Eightbound, blah 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 blah. Yep. Uh, Everett, I love your optimism. I don't think that you're going to have that many points on a list. What is my opinion on Terminators? Worth stuffing in a Land Raider and driving up the middle to cause problems. My opinion on Terminators is that they're a very good unit, despite my misinterpretation of the rules. Are they going to be worth putting in a Land Raider? No, they're not. The Land Raider is the transport that you want to use for your Berserkers, because they benefit the most from it. You can fit 10 inside there with a Master of Executions, who can have the enhancement for free heroic, and he can have fight first for his whole unit. So that's a murder bus right there. Very, very dangerous unit inside a very dangerous vehicle. The thing about Terminators is they don't actually need the Land Raider. They're not in a position where they necessarily need to be moving up the board from the get-go. And even if they are, they can be deceptively fast with advance and charge, auto 6 advance, +2 to the move. As we said, you can actually get a 13-inch move off the base from them with 1 CP and the right blood dice application. I don't really think that's necessarily what we want to be talking about, though. I think what we need to be discussing is the fact that you can rapid ingress these guys inside a building and then move out in your next turn, where they've been completely safe for a whole turn in that building. You're going to have a 4-inch charge. They'll be able to shoot the enemy that they're going into. They'll be able to shoot other enemies. They'll have the capacity to just position in ways that we've never used them like before. They're a little bit more survivable now at T5 and 4+ invul. They're just very, very good now coming out of rapid ingress. And I think that's where we're actually going to see the play develop once people understand the sort of full, what's the word here? The full benefits of rapid ingress. How powerful it can actually be. I think that's where we're actually going to kind of see the Terminators coming into play. So overall, yeah, I think they're pretty good. What unit size would I be looking at for them? It's an interesting one. I say anywhere between 6 to 8. 10 feels like overkill, 5 feels like too little. So I think somewhere in that middle ground is probably good. What else do we have here? Found anything to support Hellbrute fighting more than once with Frenzy? I don't know, to be honest. I haven't looked into it deeply enough. Stop mocking me, Warboss of Khorne. I get that I misread it live on stream. It was embarrassing. The For the Blood God strat looks like it has a lot of play with a favourite of Khorne enhancement for lots of extra blessing of Khorne with rerolls. Fish for Angron Resurrecting. Yeah, 100%. 100%. Are you able to... Oh my god, yeah. You are actually able to do the full reroll, aren't you? In the... After you play that stratagem. That's so interesting. That actually might make that worthwhile. I think if you're planning on bringing Angron, some combination of that stratagem and that enhancement is probably going to come up a lot. As I said, you can kind of make your blood dice roll, and if you don't hit the Angron thing in your command phase, you can sort of apply the buffs that you need for your go turn, and then still fish for that Angron resurrection afterwards. And because the interesting thing as well, if you're sort of set up in a way where... Okay, so this is going to be a little bit of a complex kind of explanation, so let me try and get this right. A lot of the time when we start our turns, we've been shot off our objectives, because people generally want to kind of limit our scoring and limit our presence on objectives, right? So a lot of the time, the blood dice rerolls aren't really going to necessarily be happening. However, with the fact that you can do this blood dice roll in the combat phase after one of your units has killed an enemy unit, provided you do it at the right time, you can have kind of set it up in a way where you've positioned all your world leaders and berserkers and jackals and all that kind of good stuff, that after or during their charges and all that kind of good stuff, that they're sitting on objectives, so that when you actually get around to doing this extra blood dice roll, you're getting way more rerolls. So as a reactive ability, when you've been shot off the objectives and need to reposition onto them, this can be a really good way for finding those buffs. So I really like it for that too. As I say, it's a complex stratagem. On surface value, it kind of reads one way, but the complexity of it is actually there. So I really like it. What else do we have here? Current should be toughness 6. Yep. Should be a little bit more anyway. After reading the index, what's your knee-jerk reaction list you're thinking of? Good question, actually. I wrote a list already with the leaked points. Now, it may be incorrect. It's a Land Raider, 2 Rhinos, 30 Berserkers, and a Master of Executions in one of those squads, which is probably the Land Raider one, 2 Predator Annihilators, and 6, I believe, Exalted Eightbound and Invocatus. And that was the list. And I thought it was really fun. I don't necessarily think it's a good list anymore. And the list that I would probably like to run is double Land Raiders, no Rhinos, no Predators, just double Land Raiders, and some combination of Exalted Eightbound and Terminators hanging around the place, and as many big Berserker units with Master of Executions as possible. Oh, in that list I wrote as well, there was like 20 Jackals running around the place, because I think they still have a place. But yeah, my initial list is kind of mechanized infantry. That's what I want to mess around with for a while. And I think you can do that by 2 Land Raiders. I think that's a good play. Rain, you think the enhancement and a few battling units makes the blessings really, really consistent? Yeah, I think they're extremely consistent. We already worked out that the kind of perception of them was that they weren't consistent, and now we're sort of understanding that it's very consistent. So interesting swing about there with opinion. Need more Exalted 8-bound or regular 8-bound? Yep, so do the rest of us. And yeah, it was a lot of armor. As I said, I've kind of reflected on it now. It was very much a sort of rushed list that I wrote yesterday when I received the leak. And as I say, upon reflection, I think double Land Raider and some of the big lads kind of running around the place. See, the problem is I don't have any of the demon engines ready, and I'm not necessarily in the mood to try them. But I can also see a single Land Raider and double Maulers or double Forge Fiends being incredibly effective. And as I say, I haven't even looked at demons yet. I'm sure there's plenty of potential there. Like Angron, what can I say? Like Angron lists are going to be everywhere, and they're going to be really strong. So there's all that as well. But yeah, I think that's pretty much caught up on chat, and we're just coming up on 2 hours for the stream. So unless anyone has any final things to say, to share with me, to ask me, blah, 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 I hope everyone has enjoyed the stream. I hope it's been really fun. I've had a ton of fun kind of rambling on for the last 2 hours about the data sheets, what I think about them, all that sort of good stuff. There's going to be tons and tons of Red Pack content coming on Spotify, on Twitch, on YouTube as well. We've got a painting video on Berserkers dropping tomorrow, which is exciting. We're going to have points reviews on Friday or Saturday, depending. I have a really cool video coming out later this week or early next week, which involves 2 of my buddies who play Thousand Suns and Deckard, where we kind of have a roundtable discussion about everything. There's going to be tons of content coming out. If you are not already subscribed, please do. We'd really appreciate it. If you want to contribute in any way, we've got super chats here. We have Patreon. We have Twitch. So if you're on Amazon and you've got your Amazon Prime or whatever, you can do your Twitch Prime to our account. There's loads of ways to support us. I don't want to ramble on too much about it because I kind of hate doing it. But the links are all in the description. The main thing I would say, if you're not already in the Discord, hop on in. We're chatting there all the time about new ideas. A load of the things that I've said are actually courtesy of people in the Discord. So specifically shout out to Rin, Iron Dan in there as well, Games, Warboss. Like, you've all been coming up with crazy things throughout the day, and I'm here for it. I love that energy. So if you're not already part of the conversation, find the link in the video description and join it. It's just tons of good fun. But yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining out. Anyone who's super chatted, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate all that support. It goes an awful long way in helping the channel grow. And thank you so much for chatting, for coming out and watching the stream. It's been a ton of fun. I've been Dara. There's going to be loads more Red Path content over the next 2 weeks. So I can't wait to see you there for all that. Can't wait to start building lists with everyone. It's so exciting. I'm hype. I hope you're hype. Thank you so much for hanging out.